think I have a solid guess as to what will happen at the end of this movie, but I do have a past and bad takes, so don't hold me too harshly to any of it. But it's probably raps for poor Scott. As much as it pains me to say it, bro ain't making it out the quantum realm. Looks like my streak continues. Ant-Man Quantumania has officially been released, and I have never felt so conflicted about an MCU film after my initial watch, and even after my second watch as well. Typically I can pinpoint off the rip if I was blessed with some peak cinema or got scammed out a $20 ticket, but this is I don't know. It's just that this movie is pretty decent for the most part. It even hits some very high highs in some aspects, but then completely drops the ball in some others. All I know for certain is that somewhere out there, those script leakers are having a tough time because they were way off. If you're new here, maybe you should drop a like and subscribe to the channel on the road to 1,000 subs. It's absolutely free to you, and I'm sure your future self will be thanking you immensely for it. This post-Blip film follows Scott Lang as he is capitalizing off of his Avengers clout. We are met with a pleasant Jimmy Woo cameo before the Ant crew ends up getting sucked into the quantum realm. The same place Scott got stuck in before Endgame, although Janet had been in there for 30 years and had many more skeletons in her closet that have yet to be revealed to her own family. Secrets that include working with the multiversal threat of Kang the Conqueror. Look, I may not be the best with predictions, but one thing I absolutely nailed on the head is that my boy Jonathan Majors was bodying the role like his life depended on it. And knowing how Marvel fans to get, it probably was. Majors flexes his range with the majorly different Kang variant, as instead of the kooky, unhinged dude we got at the end of Loki Season 1, we now have the ominous, multiverse ender that is feared by trillions, including himself apparently. Just that raw intimidation he exudes, while also having that hint of empathy and reassurance in his voice, meaning that when he says that he absolutely has to destroy these timelines, yeah, it may sound bad, but you kind of feel like you need to hear him out a bit, especially due to the fact that this isn't a mad titan or some celestial entity, but just a normal human, seemingly cursed with knowledge beyond all of our understanding. Kang held as a stark contrast to the rest of the comedy-riddled protagonists, which I'm extremely glad they decided to do. Instead of forcing corny lines down his throat, they just let him cook, giving him Thanos-level quotes. Bro's got the MVP of this movie, and it's not really even close. This movie is all a give and take situation, because you're not going to have multiple good things going for you without messing up something along the process. For every Jonathan Majors level character building and performance you get, you also have Michael Douglas, who sort of just finesse his way into getting an easy bag as Hank Pym.
This is the third installment in the franchise. If they did a fourth, would you come back?
As long as I could die.
Like I said, give and take. One thing in particular I think Quantumania gave us very well, surprisingly, is the comedy. There's no shock when I say that many people have criticized a lot of recent MCU projects for their overindulgence in humor as a method of forced character connections with the audience. However, the humor, as expected, comes off as too forced and ends up just not being funny. Someone even go as far as to say it's a pain to watch at times. I fully expected to be bombarded with cringe, but Quantumania was pretty good in this aspect. Everything from the execution of jokes down to the comedic timing. Maybe it's because the MCU Ant-Man series has always been a franchise highly characterized by its layer of humor, to the point that it sort of feels like second nature rather than a forced addition. I mean, not only do you have Paul Rudd of all people playing the role, but with the absurdity of an ant-sized man fighting crime in live action, the serious route for this character just never really stood a fighting chance. The same principle can be applied to MODOK, who literally had me in tears the first time I saw him. You see, when you have a character that is essentially a giant head dude in a floating chair, again, a serious route never really stood a chance. They utilized him in the most optimal manner as possible. He served as a nice point of dichotomy from the actual big bad, and hey, even his last scenes were a work of art when it comes to comedic timing. Ant-Man was just a pretty funny movie, but like I said earlier, it's a give and take relationship, and unfortunately, a lot of take can be seen in the technical aspects of this movie. Even in a film such as this, where the visuals are a huge selling point, with this draw to the vast and unique quantum realm lifestyle, you can't escape the color grading issues that seem like they are purposely trying to make every shot look as dark as possible. Marvel projects have been exposed for years now for their sometimes dull or lifeless looking movies, and it feels like it has only gotten worse, especially when it seems like they're only doing it here to cover up some questionable CGI at times, which we can definitely still see. I mean, it already looks like something I would see out of Spy Kids, so they might as well embrace it at this point. It's like they get embarrassed at a problem that they themselves created. Like, another thing they'll do is super quick cuts during certain action scenes to the point you can't even tell what's going on in the sequence. They hit you with back to back cuts before the human eye can even process what's going on, and they just call it a day. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantamania isn't the 100% spectacular, knock right out of the park home run Phase 5 opening that many people have hoped for, but to say that it was a 47% critic score level is just a downright atrocious take. And I just can't completely wrap my head around the justification of this level, even from a critic's perspective. And I typically tend to lean more towards the critics over general audiences when it comes to the MCU. To put things into perspective, these critic scores literally place Quantumania in the bottom 3, making it a contender for the worst MCU film of all time. This means that this movie is seen in the same ballpark as something like The Eternals, a movie that is not only an overall way worse viewing experience, but one that was publicly known to be review bombed heavily. There's just no way to actually justify a 20 or 30% score difference between Quantumania and movies like Thor: Love and Thunder, Multiverse of Madness, or even something like The Incredible Hulk. There just isn't any significant area that they were so immensely lacking in that would discern them from the average quality we would get from the MCU, especially looking at Phase 4 and forward. I'm taking Michelle Pfeiffer's, Paul Rudd, and of course Jonathan Majors' performances here over other movies. I'm taking the comedic value of this movie over other releases. The dialogue is meh at times, but to say borderline worse in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe is just pushing it too hard. If I had to make my best inference as to why a conclusion of this magnitude has arisen, I would say that people are just moody because this wasn't the immediate status quo changer that they were looking for after getting a whole phase of going relatively slow in pace, especially with script leaks releasing a month before the movie came out, suggesting that some lasting consequences would actually arise. And you know what? I'm here with you 100% if you are of that belief. They played it way too safe with the bad guy losing and the good guy coming out on top in the end, virtually unscathed. And yeah, future variants will be more dangerous of a threat later on. I get that. But when you have this introduction to the next multiple phase big bad, you have multiple opportunities at hand that make thematic sense and will entice the audience. And you have restless fans dropping out left and right. You just have to capitalize on doing something big to set the tone moving forward. Like, hey, this dude is an actual threat and can realistically take over. Instead, we get a Kang who is supposedly so dangerous that he is banished by the other Kangs, being taken out in one movie and leaving no lasting effects. It doesn't feel intimidating, and I have a bad feeling that he will be relegated to the new Kang of the Week type villain. With all that being said, it's still an extreme reach to claim that this is bottom Marvel movie ever made material. I do think that this is a sign of the ever-growing audience impatience. It may not be this year, or the next year, or the next, but if this kept up, we may be seeing the contributing factors to the downfall of the MCU. Who am I kidding? They are making the big money regardless.